Right. A very good afternoon to our esteemed guests, Mr. Irfan A. Kazi, Chief Investment Officer, Swami Investment Fund 1, Mr. Nandu Bilani, President, CREDAI Bengal, Mr. Harshvardhan Patodia, President, CREDAI National, Mr. Apurva Salarpuria, Vice President, CREDAI Bengal, our esteemed members, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sanjukta Dastedar, and on behalf of CREDAI Bengal, I extend a very warm welcome to all our distinguished guests and participants to the webinar today, Swami Solution for Stress. I will now request Mr. Nandu Bilani to welcome our esteemed guests, members, and participants to this special session today. Please, sir.
Very good evening to everyone, and I welcome you all and all our members from our other chapters also who joined us at this webinar today. I extend a warm welcome on behalf of all my colleagues to Mr. Irfan Kazi, Chief Investment Officer of Swami Fund, which is the short for Special Window for Affordable and Mid-Income Housing Fund, and who is keynote speaker today. Mr. Kazi has 25 years of international work experience in alternate investment, and amongst some of his prior distinguished investments, he has been the CIO of a USD 20 million hedge fund, CIO of Indus Hotel Ventures, a 200 million hospitality fund, and Indospace Logistics, the USD 250 plus million industrial and warehousing fund. As we are aware, the Swami Investment Fund is a special window in the form of AIF, which was set up by the Union Cabinet to provide debt financing for the completion of stressed housing projects. On November 6, 2019, our Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, announced this special window to complete construction of stressed projects, in which the central government is the main sponsor and has a total fund commitment of 10,000 crore. When it was announced, this scheme, they had said this is only for RERA projects. So as Bengal is always different from the rest of India, we had our own law, which has been scrapped by the, revoked by the Supreme Court. And as such, now we will also be getting into the RERA phase. So we would be welcoming the Swami Fund in Bengal very soon. The fund is a Category 2 AIF debt fund registered with SEBI and is professionally run by SBI Cap Ventures Limited as its investment manager. Mr. Kazi is the Chief Investment Officer of the Swami Fund and will present to us how this fund seeks to provide relief to developers who require funding to complete a set of unfinished projects and consequently ensure delivery of homes to the home buyers. I will not say more. I'll pass it on to Sanjukta, who will proceed with the remaining event of the today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I will now request Mr. Harshvardhan Patodia to address us. Please, sir.
Good afternoon, friends from CREDAI, Mr. Kazi, my colleague Nandu Bilani, all friends from CREDAI. In fact, we were eagerly waiting for Swami Fund to be available for developers in Bengal. So this has been possible post having the RERA regime post HIRA after Supreme Court order. I think the Swami funding model has been very well accepted across the country, and people are quite happy working with this model, and more than 5,000 homes have already been delivered in stress projects through the inclusion of Swami Fund. I think ultimately, after studying the model of Swami Fund and the real change in the DNA of the real estate business, I think ultimately real estate financing will have to go this way for all kinds of construction finance, not the traditional finance. That is my understanding of the way things are and the way things should move in the future. Maybe the banking system, the RBI are not yet ready to accept this kind of model for real estate financing, but ultimately, CREDAI, we are going to make presentations on this basis. I think Swami Fund has done a wonderful job, and the entire operation is transparent and very, very considerate, and they are helping both the developers and the customers to get delivery of homes in project which was stuck. I think this is a great service for the consumers and developers to bail themselves out. I really appreciate the work done by Mr. Kazi and his team, and they are eagerly waiting to deploy funds in Bengal. Friends, let's come forward, take advantage of this fund. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I will now request Mr. Kazi to present to us the Swami Investment Fund, which will be followed by a question answer session moderated by Mr. Apurva Salarpuri. Participants are requested to post all queries in the Q&A box. Please, Mr. Kazi, the floor is yours.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Mr. Patodia, Mr. Bilani, and Mr. Salarpuria, and CREDAI members present here for giving me this opportunity to reach out to you. It's funding projects in West Bengal is as much in our interest as it is in yours. We are extremely eager that this government-sponsored fund will start reviving, should start reviving projects soon in West Bengal, as we have already done in the rest of India. So we come with an advantage, right? We've lost some time in the process, but we come with an advantage. We now have, almost a tried, time-tested model in place. We have, understood this process. We've learned along the way, and so, for the rest of this discussion, what I'll do is, with a very brief introduction to the history of time as far as the Swami Fund is concerned, I'll take you through the entire process. The mandate, how a developer should approach us, what do we do, the approvals we give, what happens after we give an approval, how do we see the project getting completed, and so on. So to start at the beginning, right, the dates that were mentioned, November 6, 2019, is when the Honorable Finance Minister announced this special window for affordable and mid-income housing. Clearly, the term Swami was coined by us, more from the working group to make it easier to capture the long phrase repeatedly in all our documents. So Swami is the special window for affordable and mid-income housing. Within a month of the announcement, and that's something that we keep talking about, because honestly, modesty aside, that's something that was unheard of in fundraising and in the AIF industry. We had closed the fund. We had closed the fund with 10,000 crores, making it the largest domestic private equity fund. And this closure included drafting documents, getting SEBI registration, incorporating the trust, incorporating funding documents, signing on those funding documents, each of the investors getting their individual approvals, and so on. All this happened within a month. And that set the pace for life ahead. We've clearly grown at a pace which we'll find, we think it's very difficult for anyone to match. So in the last 2 years or so, we have come a long way in terms of the number of approvals we've given, the number of projects we've funded, but that's all academic, right? At the end of the day, what really matters is how many homes have got completed, or how many homes are to be completed. And we even have achieved some milestones there, which I'll come to as we go along. So first things first, what is the mandate of this fund, right? What makes the Swami Fund different, etc. And we'll get into what makes it different. But let's say, what is the mandate of the fund? So the mandate of the fund is clearly to provide last mile funding to stressed projects in the affordable and mid-income sector. And my apologies if this sounds repetitive to anyone who's heard seminars earlier, but this is the first time I'm addressing the audience specifically from West Bengal. So I will get into basics as well as certain more finer nuances about the fund. So in terms of the definition of affordable and mid-income housing. Now, the term affordable has been defined in by various government agencies. GST has a definition. The harmonized list of infrastructure has a definition of affordable. RBI alludes to the definition of affordable when it comes to home loans and so on. But affordable and mid-income, the phrase has not been defined. So we took this opportunity to define that phrase. And we defined that as houses less than 200 square meters RERA carpet area and costing less than 2 crores in Mumbai, 1.5 crores in the major cities, including Kolkata, and 1 crore in the rest of India. So that was our definition for affordable and mid-income housing. I'd like to emphasize here that the definition is by design liberal and not by accident. It was, while conceptualizing the definition, we took care to ensure that most of the projects would fit within the definition. So as long as the project meets the affordable housing definition, it falls within the mandate of the fund. Now, that's a broad criteria, but I can also give you finer nuances here. It is not necessarily that all the apartments in the project meet that criteria. So it's not like all the apartments have to be less than 1.5 crore in Kolkata. There can be some apartments which are priced higher, which have a larger carpet area and so on, and it would still be eligible for funding from this fund. So the rule is that at least 90% of the apartments should meet this criteria. Now, that said, and this applies to the rest of the entire discussion that I'm going to have here today. If your project broadly meets the criteria, right? If instead of 90%, 85% of the homes meet the affordable and mid-income criteria, please do not take that as a no from the fund. Approach us. We'll find a way of structuring the project. We'll find a way of structuring our funding so that there is a solution. We don't just say no to you. So we've done that several times in the past, and we'll be doing it again, that we'll look at how to fit the fund, how to fit the project, how to fit your project into our funding criteria. But clearly, if all the apartments, if let's say hypothetically starting price of the apartments is from 2 crore onwards, then clearly it does not meet this, that's a project that is not for this fund. And therefore, we will not be able to do much about it. It is not just for apartments, it's also for plotted developments. And when calculating the cost for a plotted development, we will consider the available the cost of the plot, the available FSI, and cost of construction in determining whether that it meets the affordable and mid-income criteria. So that is about the definition of affordable and mid-income. This is not a fund for providing capital to new projects. It is a fund for providing capital to projects which have started and which have got stalled, somewhere along the line. And therefore, it is only for brownfield projects. It is not for greenfield projects. And how do we define color here? We've chosen to define it by looking at the total project cost. And project cost is inclusive of all costs, including land cost, FSI cost, soft cost, hard cost, architect cost, broker's cost, brokerage, whatever, all kinds of costs that are associated with the project are included in project cost, including penalties and so on. And then, as long as the project expenditure has crossed a 30% threshold, the project is eligible for funding from the SWAMI fund. So the criteria is that at least 30% of the project cost should have been incurred. We look at that as a brownfield project that we can fund. The other criteria that we have is that this should be a net worth positive fund. And what do we mean by that? See, net worth positive is generally a terminology that is used in financial accounts and by CAs and MBA finances and so on. Here we are referring to a project which is profitable going ahead. We do not care much about what expenses have been incurred in the past, as long as the cost to complete the project is less than the value of the inventory, unsold inventory, and the sold receivables. That project is net worth positive. And if the project is net worth positive, we can do the funding. Why is that criteria so important? The criteria is important because this is a fund. It is backed by investors. It is trying to create a social impact. And the world over, the experience has been that the scale and the success of the social impact is there and is achieved only if it is backed by if it is also an investment proposition at the same time. So we have about 14 investors in our fund. The government is the largest investor. SBI and LIC are two other large investors in the fund. Most of the public sector banks are investors in the fund. And since I've got into this discussion, I might also tell you very clearly that neither the government nor SBI nor LIC has any say in the decision making that the fund does. So the fund has an independent investment committee, and this independent investment committee takes all the decisions on behalf of the fund. It is not influenced by the investors at all. So that's important. The other bit is that this is a fund that provides last mile funding. And what is last mile funding? Now, that's a phrase in English that could have been interpreted in many ways. We have chosen to interpret it as funding which by itself is sufficient to complete the project. Our funding is not reliant on future sales. It is not reliant on, not significantly reliant on future collections, and can by itself complete a project. So this is where we are dramatically different from any other funding solution that was there in the past, from the way funding was provided by banks and NBFCs, where traditionally that institutional funding was only a component in the total funding plan or sources of funds for the project. And there was a lot of reliance on receivables and sales. And naturally, that led to a gap in the funding when sales were slow or receivables didn't show up or receivables weren't collected. And that led to the project getting stalled. And that's that cycle continues. So the project is stalled. So there are no sales taking place, and therefore no collections are taking place, and so on. So unlike that funding of the past, this funding is last mile funding, which is by itself sufficient to take the project to completion. So that's a very important part of the fund. Finally, this project or the fund also provides senior funding. And what do you mean by senior funding? It means that the fund will come in, complete the project, and then will be the first to exit. So all the cash flows will come to the fund, and then the fund will exit the project. And only after that, cash flows will go to any other lender in the project, and then it will go to any other, go to the developer, and so on, right? So that is a first in, last in, first out approach to funding, which is possible by having a senior charge on the project assets. We generally take a charge only, or to a large extent, on the project assets, only if there are other related risks in the projects. Then we ask for additional collateral, but that is more an exception, not a rule. So that's that about senior charge, about last mile funding. I would also emphasize that, therefore, if there is an existing lender in the project, then the existing lender has to give his NOC, has to agree to Swami Fund coming in, taking a senior charge, completing the project, exiting the project, so that cash flows are freed up for the existing lender and then for the developer. There are projects where there are no lenders in the project, and those projects obviously do not have an issue on giving senior charge. There are also projects where other AIFs are lenders, and again, most AIFs do not have any issues in ceding charge. Banks and NBFCs do have some issues, so it is slightly more difficult for them because it results in a change in the health classification of that asset, and therefore the provisioning that they have to make. That said, those are difficulties that we've encountered across the way. But that said, we have given now final approval to 91 projects. We've given initial approval to 141 projects. So let me now start with, and I'll explain that a bit as we go along. Let me just start with what is it that a developer needs to do, what is the process along the way, and so on. So once you have a broad idea about the fund, the developer needs to approach the Swami team. And we've tried to make that access as democratic and as easy as possible for everybody. So, you can go to our website, sbicapventures.com. I think it's question number 14, which has an attachment which needs to be filled. And that needs to be emailed to our team, ahf@sbicapventures.com, to that email ID. The email ID and the attachment are there on our website. The attachment is an application form. The application form has has already been circulated as a WhatsApp message also to all of CREDAI across the country. So hopefully members in West Bengal would have also got it. If they haven't, then we'll ensure that it happens, maybe sometime after this webinar. But that attachment is available on the website. The application form is so designed that, with about 10 minutes of work, an informed developer can easily fill it up and send it to us. Once we receive the application form, we have a two-stage approval process. We first rely, almost completely on the information given by the developer. We also do some desktop diligence, look through some databases that we have. And on that basis, we prepare an investment proposal. In that proposal, our emphasis is on ensuring that the project meets our funding criteria, primarily our funding criteria, which is it's affordable and mid-income, it's 30% complete, it is net worth positive, and so on. And it is RERA registered. So that's one criteria that I actually left out strangely in this discussion. So we look at only RERA registered projects, and for that reason, we haven't been able to do projects from West Bengal, but things are changing here, and therefore we've started to look at projects from West Bengal as well. And we will look at the project even if it does not have a RERA registration right now, in the hope that while we are looking at it, while we are taking it through our evaluation process, it will get a RERA registration, so that RERA registration will be a condition precedent towards funding the deal. So the deal will not get completed till we get the RERA registration. That said, once we get a proposal, we rely on the developer information, prepare a proposal, take it to our investment committee. The investment committee gives a preliminary approval after deliberation. Once we get a preliminary approval, we go back and we ask the developer to appoint external agencies to do due diligence. So the developer will appoint external agencies to do legal due diligence, title due diligence, forensic due diligence, corporate due diligence, financial due diligence, and so on. These are independent third-party agencies, experts in their field, who will be appointed by the developer, who will prepare a report, who will give it to us. On the basis of that report, we'll prepare a final proposal and take it to our investment committee. And assuming everything goes all right and there are no deal breakers, the investment committee will give an approval. So then we'll get a final approval. So just to put things in context, we have got 141 deals that have got a preliminary approval and are now going through a due diligence process. We have 91 deals that have got a final approval. So they have already been through they've got prelim approval, they've been through the diligence, and they've got a final approval. The 91 deals, therefore, will complete about 56,000 homes. That's the target that will be achieved over the next 3 to 4 years, as long as the project takes to get completed. In fact, we are currently at a run rate where we are hoping to complete at least 10,000 homes every year. So that's the pace we are at. If the prelim deals get approved, get a final approval, we'll be able to complete an additional 76,000 homes. But approval of the prelim deals depends upon what is unearthed, what is found out during the due diligence process. So, there is an element of uncertainty. Not all prelim deals get a final approval, but at least those that get a final approval will get the funding, subject to some more steps. So what happens is, after our IC has given a final approval, it effectively means that anything and everything that we had to do in the process is done. Our homework, our classwork is over. Documentation is to be completed, and documentation includes 3 or 4 other things, which then take up a little bit of time. And I'll just quickly take you through that. So one is, if there is an existing lender in the project, then the existing lender has to sign an NOC, has to sign an inter-creditor agreement. So that is negotiated, and that is, it takes some convincing to get the lender to give an approval and to sign those documents. So that needs to be completed. There are many cases where home buyer approval is required. It won't be applicable here, but in cases across the country where a project is delayed and and therefore the developer has to apply for extension, the developer needs to take home buyer approval, and therefore we have to wait till 50 to 75% of the home buyers have given their approval. The other bit is what happens in a lot of stalled projects is essential approvals have expired. So for example, environmental approval would have expired in some cases. Building plan approval, RERA registration, etc., would have expired. Now, a lot of these approvals are, in the nature of hygiene, more than strictly required to commence the project or to commence funding for the project, and therefore, without RERA approval, without environmental approval, we cannot do the funding, and therefore we will wait till the developer gets those approvals. There are also many cases that arise that during due diligence there are many disputes that are discovered in the project. Right? There are some NCLT petitions that are discovered. There are cases that are discovered, and to some extent or to a large extent, we try to settle some or many of these cases before we get it. The idea is not so much to protect ourselves, but to protect the project, so that once funding starts, it has an unhindered run to complete the entire project, right? So that's this. Now, what happens, we've given final approval, documentation is complete, the project has started getting funding. Does this mean that there is a coupon rate or anything like that? No. In terms of repayment, this is a construction-focused fund that walks that language when it comes to repayment. So we have structured our investment in the form of NCDs, non-convertible debentures, which need to be repaid only after the project is completed. So there is absolutely no repayment that is required during the course of construction. Only after construction is complete, when there is excess cash flow that is available, that cash flow is, in a manner of speaking, swept in to repay the fund and to redeem the NCDs. So, and the target IRR here, in case I didn't mention, I'm not quite sure, is 12%. So a 12% NCD, 12% which is completely back-ended, which needs to be repaid only when the construction is complete. In fact, we go to the extent of saying that if there are sales and collections during the course of construction, even those sales and collections can be used in the project itself. They need not come back to the lender or to the investor, that is us. They will go back into the project so that there is more money available to complete the project. And therefore, what we are doing is, the developers we are working with, we ask them to, not work on just one point in the site, to work on multiple points within the same site. So to the extent that it's, technically feasible, if there are 4 structures that are coming up, to continue or to commence work on all 4 structures. If there is a finishing work or block work that can happen on the lower floors, to start that while the structure is still going up vertically. The idea is, one, to complete construction at the earliest, because the fund believes that completed inventory will sell. And for this reason, right, the fact that we emphasize so much on construction, we emphasize on multiple points of work within a site, we expect projects to be completed even ahead of the business plan that is submitted by the developer. And currently our Swami sites have about 15,000 plus laborers. In fact, the worker density on our sites is probably the highest compared to, is probably much higher when compared to any other developer or any other funded site. So that was that. But once construction starts, right, we start funding. But what makes the Swami Fund different is not the fact that we give last mile funding. That is only one half of the solution, one part of the solution. The other part of the solution is to ensure that this funding is used for the project only. So we go to great lengths and pains and effort to ensure that the funding is used to complete the project and nothing else. And how do we do that? One, for every project that we fund, we appoint a project management company, a PMC company that has a representative on the site all the time. So, if the site is functional 24/7, there is a representation from the PMC company 24/7 at the site. And what does that ensure? That ensures that we go by the trust but verify principle. So we trust our developers and we trust that everything is being done in the interest of the project. but we will also verify all expenditure before reimbursing it. So two keywords there, verify and reimbursement. So what we do is every expenditure at the site is first vouched for or first certified with the developer. It is then passed to the PMC company. Now the PMC company is present at the site itself in the site office of the developer. And therefore the PMC company is able to give us daily reports on labor mobilization, on material mobilization, on where work is happening, on what project, what problems are being encountered at the site and so on, right? So after the developer has prepared a bill, it goes to the PMC company representative at the site. They certify the bill. It then comes to our team. And then our team will check that expenditure against the expenditure we had estimated at the time of due diligence. And which part of that expenditure it fits in, and then that expenditure is cleared, and then the payment is done. So payment is done only for project related work. Payment is always in the past tense. It is a reimbursement. It is not an advance. There are some exceptions to that. So we understand that the way the industry functions, there are certain payments that are done by advance that need to be paid in advance, or a certain portion of the payment needs to be done in advance. We will do that payment. We will try and build appropriate safeguards into that. And we will keep a track on, if the advance was paid, whether the material was received and so on. All this is done with the PMC help. So that's very important, because our, effectively our fund team members are acting as CFOs for your project. They are completely aware on what work is happening where, what cash flow is required and so on. And we will rely on you to ask for reimbursements rather than advances, so that we can take care of this. All project related expenditure. Finally, one way in which we are also different from the rest of the funding fraternity is that we place emphasis on the project, not on the promoter. So we are trying to control the escrow accounts. We are trying to control disbursements. We are trying to ensure that payments are done directly to the vendor in as many cases as possible. And therefore, even if a project has suffered because of things that have happened, because of encounters with the law that have taken place as far as the promoter is concerned, we will not blame the home buyers for it. We will still try to do funding. We will do the funding with appropriate safeguards. We might ask, in exceptional cases, we might ask for a development management agreement. We might ask another promoter to take over the project, but these are exceptional solutions. These are not. These are solutions that are applied in maybe 5% of the cases, not more. Even I think 5% is a larger than real number. That's not been the experience so far. So we will not rely only on the promoter's credentials, good or bad. We will look at the project cash flows. We will be forward looking, and we'll look at what cash flows are going to happen in the future and whether they'll be sufficient to complete the project, and on that basis provide the funding. So with that, I think I've covered most of the points, and if there are questions, I'll use those questions as guides to cover some more details if required. Thank you so much.
Mr. Kazi, thank you so much for such a crisp and lucid explanation of the terms of the Swami Fund. I suspect with such a crisp and clear explanation, the number of questions will go down. But since we are only just welcoming the fund into West Bengal, let me start off with a couple of questions, and I'll request all the participants to please post their questions on the Q&A piece, and I will try and pick it up from there. So starting with a very basic question, Mr. Kazi, the order which struck down the existing HERA regulation in West Bengal actually has put forward that the projects so registered under HERA will continue to be mandated by that law. And, we are still figuring out how those will be governed. Maybe the existing, the newly set up RERA panel will kind of take them up. So as the mandate of the Swami Fund is to only deal with RERA registered project, and of course, if only brownfield projects in our case. So is there going to be a requirement for the HERA registered projects to, in addition, now go and register under RERA as well? Because that is not a requirement for projects which may not require the Swami funding.
So yes, as far as our fund mandate is concerned, it very clearly says that RERA registration is required. So if there's a HERA registration and that is, either automatically converted into a RERA registration or an additional RERA registration is given, that is something that will be decided, at the state level. We are not sure how it will happen. What we want to do is short circuit the time involved, right? So we could just wait and say that, let the project get a RERA registration and then we'll look at it. Instead, what we are saying is we'll look at it in the hope and the belief that, it will soon get a RERA registration, that the knots will untwine, or that the process will get clear in West Bengal. And once that happens and a project gets RERA registration, it's another tick in the box as far as qualifying for our funding is concerned. And we would have spent that time usefully in going through our approval process during that time.
Sure. I think that's something interesting. So we'll probably, as CREDAI, take it up with the local authorities to ensure that the old projects, where so required, can be re-registered with RERA to avail benefits.
I have a view on this.
Sure.
You see, what has happened is that the HERA law has been struck down. Okay, so now the Supreme Court has said that whatever projects have been registered will continue to be governed by the law. Is not very clearly spelled out. So law does not exist. Try to understand. The law is now RERA. HERA law has been struck down.
We'll look at it offline because on this, the judgment says that the HERA projects will continue to be governed under HERA, not under law.
Yeah, but a law which is struck down, I don't know how it will be governed. So anyway,
Right.
We have to take a legal opinion on this.
Right. We'll take accordingly, we'll take that opinion and ensure that projects which require funding from Swami can have a clarity of path on that. Can I just pick up a couple of...
One more very important question.
Sure.
Mr. Kazi, some of the, NBFCs are creating a real fuss for giving the objection, like out of which I can name a few. I've been getting, from all our members, we are getting some representation about LIC Housing and a couple of more companies which are refusing to give any kind of NOC for getting the Swami Fund into the project. What is your view and how do we kind of overcome that?
So see, we've had to achieve all the progress that we have had in spite of a lot of difficulties on this front. So there are a couple of issues here, right? So, and we've done a lot of learning here. So one is where banks or NBFCs or housing finance institutions have the first charge.
Yeah.
They have to be convinced to cede the first charge. They have their own set of difficulties because, it like I mentioned earlier, it has a effect on the status of the asset, health classification of the asset, provisioning that needs to be done, etc., right? What we've done to convince them to some extent, right, and we've been successful to some extent in that, is that we've allowed for sharing of project cash flows with the existing lender. So we've said that depending on the economics of the project, depending on what the cash flows can sustain, anywhere up to maybe 20-25% of project inflows. And when we talk of project inflows, we are talking of sales of unsold inventory and collections from sold receivables. So about anywhere up to maybe 20-25% can be shared with the existing lender. And when we say shared, we actually mean that, let's say we agree on that number as 10% or depending on the cash flows in the project. So if there are new sales or if there are new collections, 10% of those new sales or new collections can go to the existing lender. The balance 90% does not come to the Swami Fund. The balance 90% is plowed back into the project. So we stick to the same line that all the money except for what is shared with the lender will go back into the project. So you have to look at that 10-20% vis-a-vis Swami getting zero at the same point in time. So that's one. Two, lenders look at this as a portfolio decision. There are some projects which they can nurture, which they can fund, and therefore they are not willing to cede charge. but they cannot do this for all their projects. So they agree to relinquish charge on some of their projects, and we look at those projects. So that's the other bit. The third bit is there are a lot of projects where there are no lenders at all. Right? Those projects, when they were launched, had good sales. They did not require external funding. Now, when sales have stopped for the last 1 or 2 years or even more, or the project has stress in it, funding is not available from the traditional lending institutions, right? So those projects are coming to us as well. And finally, if a project is funded by an AIF like us, right, and there are many other real estate private equity funds in the market, if a project is funded, they do not care much about first charge and second charge. They are more interested on the cash flows and the ability to revive the project, and therefore, take advantage of the Swami funding. So again, those are the projects that we do. So while there is no denying the fact that in some cases getting a NOC is difficult, there are enough of other cases where we have got NOCs and we've done funding to complete the project.
Mr. Kazi, can't we get this standardized as a protocol that the government should give a direction or something that, this for stress projects to get the consumers getting delivery, can't we get this somewhere standardized and get a kind of a protocol
mandated by the government that they should be accommodated as long as it's a positive project where the revenues are positive. Only in those cases.
So understand my position, right? This is a policy statement. I cannot comment on it.
Okay, Apurva,
Yeah, before I move on to the questions from the participants, if there are any other questions from the panelists, Nandu uncle or Harsh Tauji, or should I move on further?
Yeah, move on.
Yeah, great. So I'm just picking out a few questions which are in the chat box. So Mr. Kazi, there is a few questions on the same subject. People asking about if there is a minimum or a maximum size in terms of square footage of the project which is mandated, and similarly, is there also a minimum or and maximum in terms of funding which is mandated for the projects?
So the answer is no. The short answer is no, but let me explain that. Right? We are looking at one building projects, and we are also looking at projects where there are 3,000 to 4,000 home units. So we are funding across the spectrum. We do not technically have a minimum, so we are willing to look at very small projects. We can do up to 400 crores in any one project and up to 800 crores with any one developer. So we can do multiple deals where the same developer is involved, as long as the total exposure does not exceed 800 crores. But in a single project, we cannot invest more than 400 crores. Now, is there a minimum? No. But given the fact that we do a detailed due diligence exercise, given the fact that we have a PMC, we insist that a PMC representative should be at the site, right? Given what we've seen in terms of deal flow, we think it makes sense only if the deal is about 10 crores or more. So only if the funding required is 10 crores or more, does it make sense to go through the entire process of doing a detailed due diligence, having a PMC representative at the site and so on, because these are cost items, and otherwise they would add up to a significant portion of the 12% cost.
Sure. So another fundamental question which is there in the chat box is around the definition of a stressed asset, whether it is only if construction has come to a halt, or if there are construction is kind of running behind desired pace. How would the fund look at the definition of a stressed asset? So
see, we define stress as a mismatch in cash flows, right? As long as your cash inflows, both in the recent past as well as expected in the future, are far less than what is required to complete the project, right? And how do you decide what is required to complete a project? Your project has a certain date that has been assured to the home buyers. Even if that date is not explicitly mentioned, and it's highly unlikely that it's not, there is an expectation that the project will get over in 3 years and so on. And to complete the project in 3 years, you require certain construction expenditure to happen on an average on a quarterly basis going ahead. If the project inflows are not, either equal to or greater than that, then you have a problem brewing. It's a matter of time before your project becomes, before it becomes clear that the project is underfunded. So we define stress that way. If there is a mismatch in this. Now, stress can even go to the extent of the project being completely stalled, right? We are looking at projects where no sales have happened for the last 3 years, no construction has happened for the last 5 years, and we can still do that. So that is an extreme form of stress, but projects need not, and it becomes very difficult to revive those projects.
Sure.
So projects need not reach, such a critical state if it's clear that the funding that is available, both from internal and external sources, from the promoter, from home buyers, from existing lenders, is insufficient to keep pace, to keep the pace of construction on, then the project is stressed and can approach the Swami Fund.
Sure. I think that gives a fair amount of coverage as far as stressed assets are concerned. Again, while you might have covered this, just for sake of clarity, I'm picking out these questions. Sure. So, costs which are already lying in the books as creditors, basically liabilities which are unpaid, and soft costs like HR, admin, marketing, are these kind of costs covered by the future funding which could be received from Swami?
Absolutely. So we cover creditors. In fact, when we talk of the 30% criteria, that 30% of the project cost should have been incurred, we mean it should have been incurred, right? It could be in the form of trade creditors, it could even be in the form of barter, and that is okay. Sure. Right? And when we cover project costs, we'll cover all project costs. It's not possible to function without HR, admin, and so on. So, marketing costs and all that. So all those costs are covered within the project cost.
Sure. Mr. Kazi, also now coming to the cost of the finance, you mentioned an IRR of 12%, which is the target IRR. So A, is this fixed across projects? And B, does this mean that this is the interest amount, or does it cover other incidental charges like upfront fees, etc.?
So we have no incidental charges, right? We are not playing with words. There are no annual charges. There are no upfront fees, nothing. It's a 12% IRR. That's it. There are no other charges. So let's be very clear on that. Two, we have avoided risk-based pricing because, as a project gets into more trouble, financial institutions would typically increase the cost of funding, right? And that is a self-defeating cycle because, then at that cost of funding, the project is not profitable and so on. So we have a standard, transparent 12% across all projects that we fund.
Sure. And while you did clarify that this is in the form of NCDs, which are to be paid only post completion of the project, is the interest component of this serviceable during the tenure of the project, or even that is back-ended?
No, nothing is required to be paid. No interest, no principal, no nothing, till the project construction is complete. After that, the entire, any excess cash flows after the project is completed, they then get swept back to redeem the NCDs.
Sure.
So I think, but one pertinent point which comes from your question actually is, we are doing the funding in the form of NCDs, right? NCDs can only be issued by companies, by a corporate structure. NCDs cannot be issued by a partnership firm. NCDs cannot be issued by individuals. So, we cannot fund projects which are being developed by a partnership firm or by individuals. But does that mean that we've not funded those projects? No. We have several live examples in our portfolio right now where partnerships have got converted to a corporate structure while our approval process was going on. So we can look at, analyzing it and approving the project. And, while at the same time it converts to a corporate structure, and, when that conversion is complete, we can do the funding.
Sure. Incidentally, Mr. Kazi, as you may be aware, there is a draft note which is in the public domain where LLPs could be allowed to issue debentures in the future, but I think it's still a draft.
So whenever that comes into effect, we will also be able to do that funding.
Right. There another question which has popped up is whether funding from Swami has any impact on the rating of the project or the company, the credit rating of the project or the company?
So most of the projects, honestly, that we've seen that have reached a stage where Swami funding is required, have either stopped giving information to the credit rating company, or have stopped, do not have these rated debentures issued anytime earlier.
Right.
It can only have a beneficial effect. I mean, if the rating agency is told that Swami is coming in to complete the project, the outcome can be beneficial and nothing else.
Sure, absolutely. Another clarification which has been sought is, projects which are under the PMAY scheme or any other scheme of the government, if there is any bar on those projects accessing the Swami Fund. While it seems obvious, since it's on the box, I thought I'll still ask you.
So we've not seen any of those projects approach us for funding. Sure. Right? We will have to see on, what is the promoter's contribution, size of the project, etc. And then decide on it, whether there's a corporate structure involved which will issue NCDs, all those. So, if it's an individual developing a project under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or if it's a society developing it, there's little we can do. We cannot provide funding support to them. But if it's a corporate structure, we can look at it. But honestly, we've not crossed that bridge yet.
Sure. Sure. Now, also, as the structure is extremely attractive with all the payments back-ended, and with the real estate cycle hopefully kind of taking a positive turn as we speak, is there any bar on earlier repayment of any of these NCDs?
So we have a standard this, that if the refinancing is from project cash flows, then that's fine. If the refinancing is from external cash flows, other than the project, then there is a 3% penal rate that is applied, right? But it's a hypothetical situation. Someone wanting to replace a 12% back-ended NCD funding with funding from any other source seems highly unlikely.
Right.
We have not encountered that situation yet.
Sure. And of course, as one would assume that as payments would keep coming in, the NCDs would keep getting redeemed in parts. Anyway, it's not a bullet payment which is required.
Yeah. As long as the construction is over, right. Any payments that come in will gradually repay the NCDs.
Right. Another question which comes to mind, of course, in most of these cases, where lenders are involved, personal guarantees may already be involved, but especially in cases where there may not be a lender or there may be an AIF, etc. Are there any personal guarantees also which come into play with the Swami Fund?
So we look at the standard security package. We look at personal guarantees. We look at corporate guarantees. We look at a first charge on the project collateral. We look at hypothecation of receivables. So that's quite standard, right? Sure. There could be circumstances which will be which might create some differences at the deal level. So, for example, if it's a holding company executing and there are no other companies in the group that are executing a project, then there is no company to give a corporate guarantee. So we'll look at that. So there'll be some exceptions, but they are exceptions; they are not the rule.
Sure. Mr. Kazi, as I had suspected, with the clarity that you had given the presentation, we have run out of questions fairly early. You've provided a high amount of clarity, and unless there are any questions from the rest of the panelists, I will proceed to thank Mr. Kazi, for so kindly taking this time out and sharing all the aspects of the Swami Fund with us. It's been heartening to know the number of homes which have already kind of been touched by the Swami Fund, and I think the industry as a whole will benefit in a large manner by the infusion of these funds. The entire ripple effect of this, and I'm sure when we look back at this, this decade and this era, the Swami Fund will stand out as a landmark form of funding, which would have not only helped a large number of stressed assets come back to life, but also added a new dimension to the real estate financing in our country, especially for housing, given that most of it has either been through banking channels or NBFCs. With that, Mr. Kazi, on behalf of CREDAI Bengal, I would like to thank you once again for taking this time and sharing with all our members the benefits of the fund. I'm sure you will get in a lot of applications from our state, and a lot of our members will look forward to working with you. We will collect the WhatsApp, the form which you mentioned, and we'll circulate it to our members again. And with also, if there is a presentation that you would like to be shared with our members, we would be happy to kind of share that with our members.
So we have considerable amount of information on our website, and the entire idea of having this webinar is to get more applications and get more projects. So we would, we are as excited as the rest of the developers in West Bengal that we've got an opportunity to work here.
Absolutely. I'm sure this is the beginning of a partnership between Swami and the developers in West Bengal. So we look forward to that. And thank you once again, Mr. Kazi.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kazi, for your time and a very clear presentation that you gave. So it was really nice. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bilani. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Sanjukta.
Right.
Bye.